Up to this point, when we've been configuring our VMs, we've been configuring it based upon the servers that we're consolidating on our network. So whether they be file servers, whether they be application servers, and that's how we've been thinking about this. But I want to give you another idea here, and you may already know all about this, but something called Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, or VDI. And the reason I want to talk about this is there's a couple of features while we're here in Hyper-V that I want to show you that can relate to that kind of environment. Now, there's a lot of different ways to use them, but that's one particular way. And now what a VDI environment is where instead of your users using clients where they have the locally installed OS and the locally installed apps, what you can do is you can virtualize that and put it up on virtual machines instead, like Windows 8 virtual machines. And then those end users will connect to those machines using the remote desktop protocol, RDP. Now they can run their environments that way and they're fully virtualized. There's a lot of management benefits to doing a VDI environment. And there's a couple of settings that can help you with that environment. So keep in mind, the idea is the users using RDP and they want to access that environment. So one of the things I want to show you is what's called the enhanced session mode. Now, if you were setting up Hyper-V on Windows 8, this is turned on by default, but it's turned off by default on Server 2012 R2. What I'm going to do is take you into the Hyper-V settings. We haven't been in here much yet. And in the Hyper-V settings, I want to take you down to something called enhanced session mode policy. And right now, it is not enabled. You can, of course, click here and enable this to have enhanced session mode. And here's basically what it allows you to do. When you're accessing a virtual machine over RDP, you can control whether any resources or peripherals it tries to use get redirected locally. So let me give you an example. If I'm a user and I want to print to my local printer, from an RDP session to a virtual machine, this usually isn't possible, but with enhanced session mode, that gets redirected through the VM bus back to the local client so they can use that local resource or that local peripheral. You can do this for printers, USB ports, CD players, those kind of things that you would want to use locally through this virtualized environment. So you can enable the enhanced session mode. There's something else, though, that I wanted to show you, and this is known as Remote FX. And here's what problem we're running into that we can solve. There's a setting for it here in Hyper-V, and this is going to be a little bit more complicated. Think again of users remote desktoping into a virtual machine, and let's assume for a moment that that virtual machine has to run graphic-heavy programs. If they're running a CAD program or anything that requires a lot of graphics. Well, since that VM is using up CPU resources on the host, that's a lot of CPU resources. One of the things that Microsoft created with Server 2008 R2 that we still, of course, have today is Remote FX. And what this does, this lets you put in a graphics processing unit, a GPU, into the host machine. And those VMs can then use that GPU to generate all those graphics, taking the load off of the CPU. Now, here's how this works to set this up. First of all, you're going to have a physical graphics processing unit in your system. I don't, but I'm still going to take you through what it looks like to set this up. So you need a GPU, and it needs to be DirectX 11 compatible. And also the machine needs to have second level address translation, or SLAT compatibility, which most of them do now today, starting with the Intel i5s and the i7s. So you should be just fine, but you're going to want to verify that. After that, you need to install an additional component. Like I said, this is used a lot in VDI deployments. So this is where you need to install the remote desktop virtualization host. And I'll show you how to do that. You go out to Manage, Add Remove Roles, and let me show you specifically what I'm talking about. You can go in and go down to Remote Desktop Services, and I've already installed it. I just wanted you to see the role. And here it is, Remote Desktop Virtualization Host. Now, once that's installed and you have your graphics processing unit in, you've got the role installed, then you can set the Remote FX settings. Now, as far as Hyper-V goes, that's where I just was, is in here, the physical GPUs. You will now have them. You can set them and select the ones that you want to use. Now, that's for this hypervisor, what about the individual machines? Well, when you have a particular VM that you want to have use Remote FX, there's a setting for that. Under Add Hardware, you'll see Remote FX 3D video adapter, and my ad is grayed out because I don't have an actual GPU installed. But if you did have a GPU installed and you'd gone through that setup, you'd be able to add that adapter for that virtual machine. Now, users connecting to it get the benefit of greatly enhanced graphics because it's using a different processing unit from the normal CPU. So 2 additional enhancement features. If you are working with something like a virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI environment that you'll be interested in, the enhanced session mode. And if you have heavy graphics VMs that are going to be generating heavily used graphics, you're going to want to have some physical GPUs in the box. I think that's about it for this module. Let's take a look at what we covered.